The Sean Diddy Combs case, the fall of an empire. This story tells the astonishing downfall of one of the brightest stars in the music world, Sean Diddy Combs, a saga that began in late 2023 and stretched into 2025. For years, this icon shone at the pinnacle, but behind closed doors, he had a completely different face, which came to light with startling allegations and shocking details. The first allegations and the storm's beginning, late 2023. The storm erupted in November 2023. Cassie Ventura, a renowned R&B singer and former girlfriend of famous music producer and rapper Sean Diddy Combs, filed a federal civil lawsuit in New York. Ventura alleged that Combs had repeatedly raped her, trafficked her for prostitution, drugged her, and subjected her to violence over a decade. For listeners, this was a disturbing start. According to Cassie's complaint, Combs forced her into extreme sex parties he called freak-offs during their relationship. In these parties, women and male sex workers were allegedly incapacitated with drugs like ecstasy and compelled to participate in sexual acts that lasted for days. Even more horrifying, the complaint detailed that Combs repeatedly beat Cassie, even once punching her, throwing her to the ground, and kicking her in a Los Angeles hotel. Furthermore, Combs was accused of recording and threatening to expose embarrassing images of Cassie for blackmail. Combs' lawyer, Ben Brafman, immediately denied all these sexual assault and violence claims. He suggested that Cassie and other accusers were seeking an easy payday. However, in a surprising turn, just one day after the lawsuit was filed, Combs reached a confidential settlement with Cassie, closing the case. Combs announced their agreement, stating, "We have decided to resolve this matter amicably." Yet this swift settlement raised many questions. The storm continued through the rest of November 2023. Immediately after Cassie's lawsuit, 2 more women filed separate civil lawsuits against Combs under the Adult Survivors Act. These lawsuits alleged that Combs sexually assaulted, beat, and forcibly drugged young women in the early 1990s. Combs' lawyers also described these allegations as baseless. In December 2023, another woman filed a lawsuit, claiming that in 2003, when she was 17, Combs and 2 men raped her in a New York studio. The complaint alleged that the young woman, who lived near Detroit, was flown to a New York studio where she was given alcohol and drugs to incapacitate her and then serially raped. Combs publicly denied these successive allegations in a general statement on social media. On his Instagram account, he posted, "I did not do any of the horrible things alleged. I will fight for my name and the truth to the end." However, the allegations weren't limited to women. Rodney Lil Rod Jones, a former producer for Combs, filed a lawsuit in February 2024, claiming that Combs forced him and other employees to procure sex workers between 2022 and 2023, gave drugged drinks to guests at parties, and sexually harassed him without consent. Combs' camp also described these claims as completely fabricated. Federal investigation and FBI raids, March 2024. The allegations from Cassie and others did not escape the attention of federal authorities. The Homeland Security Investigations, HSI unit of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security initiated a criminal investigation into Combs in late March. And then it happened. On March 25, 2024, HSI simultaneously raided and searched Combs' mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles, and his villa on Star Island, Miami. Numerous federal agents and local police participated in these raids. In Los Angeles, television networks broadcast live helicopter footage of agents entering Combs' luxurious mansion. In Miami, agents were also seen entering Combs' home, with one team observed removing boxes of materials from the residence. Authorities declined to comment on the direct link between these searches and the civil lawsuits, but Combs' lawyers stated they believed the raids were triggered by Cassie's allegations. Combs' whereabouts during the raids were not publicly disclosed. The next day, Combs's lawyers issued a strong statement criticizing these armed raids on the homes as a gross abuse of military-level force, and announced that their client was innocent and would fight to clear his name. Evidence seized during these searches was later presented in court. Prosecutors stated that searches of Combs's homes uncovered 3 AR-15 rifles, a med bag containing large quantities of drugs, lubricants, and high heels. These items were entered into the case file as tools Combs allegedly used to organize the sex parties and keep victims under control. Combs's lawyers, however, argued that all the weapons found in their client's home were licensed and that these items did not constitute a crime. Video leak and Combs's apology, May 2024. While the investigation continued, the media also reported a critical leak to the public. In May 2024, CNN obtained and published security camera footage from 2016 showing Combs assaulting Cassie in the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. In this video, Combs is seen throwing Cassie to the ground, kicking her, and dragging her down a hotel hallway. The incident of violence had been detailed in Cassie's previous statements. She had said that on that night in 2016, Combs had previously punched her and that she was attacked while trying to escape the hotel. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office announced that despite the video being extremely disturbing, a criminal prosecution for this specific incident could not be initiated due to the statute of limitations. They also noted that no crime report regarding the footage had been made to them at the time. Initially, there was no statement from Combs's camp regarding the beating footage released by CNN. However, 2 days later, Combs posted a video message on his social media accounts, apologizing to the public. In this message, Combs admitted that his behavior in the video was inexcusable, saying, "I was disgusted then, and I'm disgusted now. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm truly sorry." This apology, while strengthening the credibility of Cassie's claims, also provided prosecutors with strong indirect evidence of admission. Later in May 2024, another unnamed woman filed a lawsuit, alleging that she was sexually assaulted by Combs in the past, between 1995 and 2000. This woman claimed that Combs forced her to use ecstasy and coerced her into group sex with his then-girlfriend, the late Kim Porter. Combs denied these allegations and moved to dismiss the lawsuit. He also filed a petition with the court requesting that the claims of a woman who sued him in December 2023, who said she was 17 in 2003, be considered entirely invalid due to the statute of limitations. In this filing, he described those allegations as shockingly baseless and outrageous. Federal indictment and Combs's arrest, September 2024. After months of investigation, a grand jury prepared an indictment with serious criminal charges against Sean Combs. On September 17, 2024, Combs was taken into custody by federal agents in Manhattan, New York, and formally arrested that same day. When the indictment was made public, Combs's lawyers acknowledged that their client was not a perfect person, but argued that he was not a criminal, and that this indictment was an attempt at an unfair prosecution. The next day, U.S. Attorney Damian Williams for the Southern District of New York announced that Combs had been charged with 3 separate offenses: racketeering RICO conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and transportation for prostitution. According to the federal indictment, Combs allegedly managed a criminal organization for over a decade, from 2008 to 2024, subjecting women and some of his employees to violence, threatening and coercing them into sexual acts, and using various methods including bribery and intimidation to cover up his crimes. The indictment alleged that Combs's criminal enterprise was involved in sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. It was claimed that Combs used his controlled music and entertainment empire to sexually exploit women, reaching out to his targets through associates, bodyguards, assistants, employees, arranging travel and hotel accommodations, equipping hotel rooms with drugs and necessary sex-related materials, and constantly monitoring victims to conceal them from the police. The indictment also revealed details of Combs's perverse sex parties, which he called freak-offs. Prosecutors stated that Combs forced women to engage in sexual activities for days, during which some were deliberately given overdose amounts of drugs, and male sex workers were also included in these sessions. Combs often watched and directed these freak-off performances, recording participants whether they knew it or not. To keep victims compliant, he allegedly constantly supplied them with drugs, exploited their financial dependence by threatening to cut off financial support, and intimidated them by threatening to end their careers. The indictment stated that Combs established a system resembling sexual slavery over victims with this power, blackmailed those who disobeyed by threatening to expose their videos, and personally committed numerous physical assaults. For instance, it was stated that Combs punched, kicked, and dragged some women on the ground, threw objects at them, and that these beatings resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal for the victims.
Furthermore, the indictment included an allegation that Combs, on one occasion, dangled a woman, later identified as Cassie's friend Bryana Bongolan, from the balcony of a 17th-story apartment. In this terrifying incident, it was claimed that Combs grabbed Bongolan, who was sleeping in his girlfriend's home, and dangled her from the balcony, screaming, "Do you know what the hell you're doing?" It was alleged that Cassie intervened, screaming, and Combs pulled the woman back inside, then threw her onto a table. Bongolan would later file a lawsuit regarding this incident and testify as a witness. The scope of the charges was extremely severe. The racketeering charge against Combs carried a potential life sentence, while the forced sex trafficking charge carried a minimum of 15 years up to life imprisonment. The charge of transporting for prostitution carried a maximum of 10 years in prison. Prosecutor Damian Williams emphasized the gravity of the allegations, calling on the public. For years, Sean Combs used his controlled business empire to abuse women and use violence and obstruct justice. The charges against him today are sexual abuse and racketeering crimes. If you have been a victim of Combs or have information about these crimes, please come forward. This investigation is not over yet. Combs appeared before Judge Robin F. Tarnofsky in federal court in Manhattan the same day. Combs pleaded not guilty and requested release on bail, but the court sent him to jail to be tried in custody. The judge ruled that Combs would not be released on bail, citing the risk of flight and tampering with witnesses due to his influence and the gravity of the alleged crimes. While Combs's family and lawyers expressed disappointment, the rap star was placed in the Federal Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn, New York. Combs's lawyers appealed the decision, offering $50 million bail and house arrest conditions, but a higher judge also rejected this offer. By November 2024, 3 separate judges had rejected Combs's requests for bail release. Even Combs's record offer of $50 million in collateral was not accepted. According to court records, one judge stated that Combs would pose a serious danger and might flee trial if released, while another judge referenced prosecution claims that Combs tried to contact some witnesses from prison. Other developments. In September 2024, as Combs's federal criminal investigation deepened, new allegations continued to emerge on the civil front. Dawn Richard, a former member of the group Diddy Combs, sued Combs in mid-September, claiming that in the early years of her music career, Combs had sexually assaulted her, subjected her to physical and psychological violence, and threatened her life. Richard also claimed she witnessed Combs violently assaulting his ex-girlfriend Cassie, seeing him brutally beat her. She also stated in her lawsuit that Combs had withheld royalties and payments from her for years. Combs's representatives rejected these claims as lies fabricated in an attempt to rewrite history, and argued that Richard made these accusations to gain attention before an album release. During this period, the suspicious death of Kim Porter, the mother of Combs's adult twin daughters in 2018, also became a subject of renewed discussion on social media. Some recalled that Porter mentioned Combs's abusive behavior in her memoirs, raising new questions among the public. Combs, however, characterized all these allegations as a conspiracy campaign. Detention, witness allegations, and new lawsuits. October-December 2024. Combs remained in prison from September 2024, awaiting his trial. In October 2024, a comprehensive search operation called Interagency Operation was conducted in the MDC prison in New York, involving various federal units. During this operation, Combs's cell block was also inspected. Although this operation was presented as a routine review for potential security vulnerabilities in the prison, the media highlighted the sight of FBI trucks and special teams at the prison where Combs was held. In November 2024, Combs and his lawyers brought up their client's bail status again. His lawyers argued that Combs had no chance of fleeing, wished to appear in court to clear his name, and that his public reputation was already ruined, making flight illogical, suggesting that circumstances had changed. However, the second bail request was also denied. Prosecutors alleged that Combs was active even while in prison, instructing family members by phone to try and reach potential witnesses. According to court records, Combs, in calls from prison, advised his relatives to contact some potential victims and to establish their own narratives for public consumption. Judge Arun Subramanian took this prosecution claim into account, emphasizing that there was a high risk of Combs influencing witnesses and destroying evidence if released, and ruled for continued detention. Combs's lawyers, however, argued that their client was being slandered with witness tampering accusations, that these claims were baseless, and that the jury pool was being poisoned by a media campaign before the trial. Meanwhile, new civil lawsuits continued to roll in like waves toward the end of 2024. In December 2024, 3 men filed separate lawsuits accusing Combs of raping them after giving them drugged drinks to incapacitate them. Each of these men alleged that Combs committed these crimes in his hotel rooms or private residence between 2019 and 2022. Combs's legal team described these allegations as full of lies and stated, "We will initiate legal action against every unethical lawyer who files a lawsuit with fabricated stories." Also in December, a previously filed lawsuit was expanded to include famous rapper Jay-Z, Sean Carter, as a defendant. In this lawsuit, an unnamed woman alleged that she was raped by Combs and Jay-Z when she was 13 years old after the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards. This allegation was vehemently denied by both Combs's and Jay-Z's camps. Given that the claimant was underage at the time and 25 years had passed since the alleged incident, the lawsuit created a major stir. At this point, the public was shocked by the sheer number and severity of the allegations. Pre-trial developments and additional indictments, January through April 2025. In January 2025, the prosecution, preparing for the criminal trial, updated the months-old indictment by submitting a superseding indictment to the court. While no new charges were added, details about 2 new female victims were included in the indictment. In addition to Cassie Ventura, referred to as Victim 1 in the original indictment, allegations that 2 other women, referred to as Victim 2 and Victim 3, were forced into commercial sexual acts by Combs were detailed. The indictment also added the incident where Combs dangled a person, understood to be Bryana Bongolan, from an apartment balcony. According to this superseding indictment, Combs forced victims, including 3 female victims, to engage in commercial sexual acts by force, threat of force, or coercion. Combs pleaded not guilty to these new allegations the same month, and his lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, stated that the prosecution's theory was still flawed and that his clients were determined to fight these charges. In February 2025, Combs's camp made its first significant move to dismiss the case, His lawyers filed a motion to dismiss the charge of transportation for prostitution, claiming that this accusation was made with racist motives. The defense argued that Combs was targeted because he was a powerful black man, and alleged that no white person has faced a similar accusation. This unusual argument implied that prosecutors were illegitimately targeting Combs. Legal experts interpreted this defense move as a procedural argument based on race, given that they could not dispute the material evidence for many other charges. The judge would later reject this request from the defense, but this filing was noteworthy in terms of the defense's strategy. During the same period, Combs and his family were dealing with other lawsuits in addition to the criminal case. In February 2025, Kirk Burroughs, co-founder of Combs's Bad Boy Entertainment Company, established in the 1990s, filed a separate lawsuit against Combs's mother, Janice Combs, and several others. Burroughs claimed that his 25% stake and profit shares in the company were fraudulently taken from him by the Combs family. Although this lawsuit was not directly related to sexual crimes, it showed that Combs's camp was fighting legal battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. In March 2025, prosecutors updated the indictment against Combs for a second time. This additional indictment in March also did not add a new charge, but it contained striking details about how Combs used his employees while running his criminal enterprise. The prosecution alleged that Combs and his associates intimidated some employees by depriving them of sleep and making them work excessively long hours. They controlled their staff through threats of physical violence, financial harm, psychological pressure, and reputational damage, and used them in this 20-year sex trafficking scheme. It was specifically argued that Combs's close security team and assistants were tasked with preventing female victims from escaping or speaking out. After this indictment update in March, Combs appeared in court once again and pleaded not guilty to the new allegations. In April 2025, weeks before jury selection, the prosecution submitted a third superseding indictment, announcing that it had added new counts. According to this revision in early April, Combs was charged with 2 additional offenses: a second count of forced sex trafficking and a second count of transporting for prostitution. Thus, the total number of charges Combs faced increased to 5. Combs also pleaded not guilty to these new additional charges, and his defense team requested a postponement of the trial start date, which was set for May 5, 2025. Lawyers stated that due to these new charges added at the last minute, the defense needed additional time to prepare, and requested a 2-month postponement of the trial to July 2025. However, Judge Arun Subramanian rejected this request within a few days, deciding that the trial would begin as scheduled. At this point, it became a matter of curiosity whether there would be a possible plea bargain between the prosecutors and the defense. For prosecutors had offered Combs a specific sentence if he accepted criminal responsibility. In the final preliminary hearing at the end of April, it became clear that Combs rejected the proposed plea deal and wanted to be exonerated in court. This decision showed that Combs chose to take a all-or-nothing risk before the jury, for he would face life imprisonment if found guilty. Jury selection and the start of the trial, May 2025. As the trial date approached, security measures were increased at the Daniel Patrick Moynihan Federal Courthouse in New York. On Monday, May 5, 2025, the jury selection, voir dire, process began for the Combs case. The court conducted a thorough questioning to select 12 impartial principal and 6 alternate jurors due to intense media interest. Potential jurors were asked if they had seen any news about Combs or the case. Many had heard some things in the media, but the judge stated that this would not automatically be grounds for exclusion. This case involves power, money, sex, and crime. We are witnessing history, said one spectator, summarizing the burden on the selected jury's shoulders.
On the morning of Monday, May 12, 2025, the 12 principal jurors, all men, and 6 alternate jurors were selected. Immediately afterward, the parties delivered their opening statements. Prosecutors emphasized that Combs was a charismatic entertainment mogul in the public eye. But behind closed doors, he had the face of an abuser who had subjected women to violence for years. To the public, he was Puff Daddy or Diddy, a cultural icon, a big businessman. But he had another side, the prosecutor addressed the jury, beginning to describe Combs's double life. Defense attorneys, in their opening statements, argued that the case was nothing more than unusual sexual preferences. They claimed that Combs's private fantasies did not mean he was involved in crime, and that his relationships were essentially consensual. The lawyers said, "My client is not a perfect person. He has been prone to violence at times, but that does not turn him into an organized sex trafficker." The defense would argue throughout the trial that Combs's ex-girlfriends were motivated by revenge or seeking money, and that many of the described incidents were role-playing in the couple's private sexual lives. Presentation of evidence. Prosecutors stated they would present a comprehensive list of evidence to the jury. Evidence revealing the defendant's alleged criminal scheme, especially items seized during raids on Combs's homes, was itemized. It was explained that the jury would be shown video recordings from Combs's freak-off sessions, which would show how Combs instructed victims and how they all exhibited a false sense of pleasure under the influence of ecstasy. Prosecutors stated that some videos even clearly showed Combs beating a woman during these sex parties. Additionally, photos of weapons, the drug bag, baby oil, and similar materials found during searches of Combs's home were presented as evidence to the jury. One of the most striking pieces of evidence was the 2016 hotel security camera video, the moment Cassie Ventura was beaten by Combs in the hallway, which was prepared to be shown to the jury. This video, released by CNN, became perhaps the most disturbing visual evidence in the case. Although the Los Angeles prosecutor's office could not take action due to the statute of limitations, these images of assault were considered part of a pattern of physical abuse in the federal case. Indeed, the jury saw with their own eyes Combs throwing Cassie to the ground, kicking her, and dragging her in the video. The defense objected to this evidence, claiming the videos were out of context and that sexual fantasies that occurred as play were distorted. However, the prosecution emphasized that this evidence was essential to demonstrate Combs's pattern of behavior. Witness testimonies and courtroom developments. May 2025. A sketch from the trial in federal court in Manhattan in May 2025. Sean Diddy Combs, right, reacts looking at family members in the courtroom. On the left, prosecutor Emily Johnson points at Combs while addressing the jury. Illustration Jane Rosenberg, Reuters. Cassie Ventura's testimony, May 12, 4/15, 2025. On the second day of the trial, Cassie Ventura, whom the prosecution called its star witness, was called to the stand. The courtroom fell into a profound silence as Cassie began to testify. Media personnel and curious spectators filled the audience. Cassie's testimony lasted approximately 4 full days, during which she recounted her past experiences in stark detail. Cassie described her 11-year tumultuous relationship with Combs as a nightmare. She stated that during this period, she repeatedly suffered physical violence, was constantly monitored by Combs through bodyguards, and was forced into sexual relations with male escorts at his behest. Those things they called freak-offs somehow became my job over time, Cassie said, asserting that Combs essentially pushed her into prostitution during these supposed sex parties. Describing how Combs abused her both physically and psychologically throughout their relationship, Cassie recounted numerous beatings, threats, and humiliations through tears. She testified that on one occasion, Combs lifted her to a balcony railing at their Los Angeles home and dangled her, screaming, "I'll kill you," an incident that would later be detailed in Bryana Bongolan's testimony. Cassie also stated in her testimony that Combs would go wild during fits of jealousy, for example, threatening to kill rapper Kid Cudi with whom she briefly dated in 2012. Combs told Cassie, "I'm going to blow up Cudi's car." And indeed, a short time later, Kid Cudi's 2012 Porsche caught fire in his garage and was rendered unusable. As Cassie recounted this incident in court, prosecutors also presented evidence of Cudi's car being torched, showing that this threat was not empty. Indeed, Kid Cudi was present in the courtroom during Cassie's testimony. Cassie concluded her testimony by saying, "What he, Combs, did to me were the most traumatic, the worst things of my life." Many in the courtroom could not hold back tears while listening to Cassie's harrowing testimony. Defense attorneys subjected Cassie to aggressive cross-examination, attempting to undermine her testimony. Cassie was questioned about living in luxury with Combs for years, gaining financial benefits from him, and even continuing to receive financial support from Combs, until 2019, after their relationship ended. The defense tried to discredit Cassie by asking questions like, "If it was so bad, why didn't you end the relationship?" Cassie, however, stated that she feared Combs and that it was impossible for her to escape due to his power and his associates. She also explained that Combs had brainwashed her for years and controlled her through emotional manipulation. The defense tried to imply that Cassie had continued her life normally by emphasizing that she married someone else and had children in 2020 and continued her career. However, Cassie responded by saying, "Those are what you see from the outside. Inside, I needed therapy. I struggled with trauma," indicating that she had received psychological support during this process. At the end of her 4-day testimony, Cassie's detailed and consistent narrative made a profound impression on the jury. Prosecutors praised Cassie's courage, calling her the living proof of Combs's alleged crimes. Testimonies of other witnesses. After Cassie, prosecutors called other witnesses to the stand, one after another, to support Combs's alleged criminal scheme. First, Cassie's mother, Bryana Ventura, recounted the injuries and emotional breakdowns she observed in Cassie during her daughter's relationship with Combs. Bryana Ventura stated that she constantly saw fear in her daughter's eyes, and that on one occasion, when she asked about bruises on her daughter's body, Cassie brushed it off by saying, "I fell down the stairs." But she later understood that Combs had beaten her. This emotional testimony from the mother served to increase the jury's empathy for the victims. Next, a witness named Capricorn Clark testified. Clark was a woman who had worked as Combs's personal assistant for a long time. In her testimony, she stated that in 2011, Combs forced her into a car at gunpoint in the middle of the night and drove her to Kid Cudi's house. Clark said that Combs believed Cassie was in contact with Kid Cudi at the time, that he was furious, and that he held Clark hostage while trying to find Cudi. Clark also testified that Combs yelled at her that night, "Today they think I'm not serious. I'm going to prove that I need to kill Cudi." This testimony directly supported Cassie's claim of a threat against Kid Cudi. Clark also stated that while working at Combs's house, she performed duties such as arranging the comings and goings of female guests and secretly carrying drug-filled bags to hotel rooms, fulfilling these tasks without question at her boss's instruction. On one occasion, Clark said that after Combs sent a female guest away from his home, he intimidated her by saying, "You know what will happen if she talks, right?" Clark's testimony provided a striking account of how Combs managed to control even those in his inner circle through a culture of fear. After Clark, a male escort known by the nickname The Punisher took the stand. This witness's true identity was kept confidential, and he testified under visual restrictions in the courtroom. This is returned in what we're seeing. Punisher stated that Combs had called him several times, offering high fees to spice up parties, which were actually the group's sexual activities Combs referred to as freak-offs. This male witness said that Combs gave him and other male escorts he brought high doses of drugs, and then watched and recorded girlfriends, like Cassie, engaging in relations with these men. Punisher stated, "Everyone there was like a toy for Combs. He would tell us what to do, then sit in his armchair and watch."
He also stated that Combs exhibited harsh and sometimes sadistic behaviors during this process, suddenly intervening and scolding both women and men if he didn't like something. This testimony strengthened the claim that Combs was not only the active perpetrator in this sexual abuse scheme, but also involved other men in the crime. The next important witness was famous rap artist Kid Cudi, Scott Mescudi. Kid Cudi had briefly dated Cassie in 2011 and was allegedly a target of Combs's jealous rage. In his testimony, Cudi confirmed that in January 2012, his Porsche, parked in front of his home in New Jersey, mysteriously caught fire. "My car suddenly caught fire. The fire department said it might have been arson," Cudi stated, adding that he wasn't sure who did it at the time, but Cassie told him that Combs had threatened this. "No one had ever threatened to kill me before. I didn't want to believe Sean could do it, but when my car turned to ashes, I remembered Cassie's words," he said. Kid Cudi also added that he never had a confrontation with Combs, but Cassie abruptly stopped seeing him in 2011, and he later heard that Cassie was being abused by Combs. Cudi's testimony created the impression among the jury that Combs's threats were not just words, but actions. Indeed, the arson of Cudi's car was also confirmed by New York police records, and prosecutors strengthened the arson claim by referencing these records. Meanwhile, the courtroom was packed every day. Public interest was extremely high. Spectators lined up in front of the courthouse early in the morning to get a seat to watch the trial. The appearance of famous names on the witness stand turned the trial into a show, attracting not only journalists, but also curious citizens to the courtroom. The New York Times even published a report calling this phenomenon trial tourism. Among those present in the courtroom were Combs's relatives, figures from the music industry, and women's rights advocates. Outside, some groups held demonstrations of support for the victims, displaying justice banners, while others, wearing Free Diddy t-shirts, claimed Combs was the victim of a conspiracy. These opposing demonstrations usually proceeded without incident, but the trial created a socially divided debate. Bryana Bongolan's testimony, her story as victim 2. In the third week of the trial, ultimately on days coinciding with the fourth week of May, Bryana Bongolan, a fashion designer and close friend of Cassie, took the witness stand. Bongolan recounted the terrifying night they experienced at Cassie's home in Los Angeles in 2016 for the first time, in full detail. In her testimony, Bongolan said, "I was sleeping on the couch at Cassie's house. Suddenly I heard Sean's screams and banging on the door." She said that Combs entered the house without permission and angrily advanced on her when he saw her on the balcony. According to Bongolan's account, Combs first started verbally abusing her, and when Bongolan resisted, Combs grabbed her by the nape of her neck and armpit, lifting her onto the railing of the 17th floor balcony. "He dangled me off the balcony. He was yelling, 'Do you know what the F **** you're doing?'" Bongolan recounted, stating that she feared dying at that moment. Since this incident occurred at Cassie's home, Cassie woke up to the screams, ran to the balcony, and intervened, shouting, "Sean, stop, don't do it." Bongolan said that after Cassie intervened, Combs pulled her back inside, but then immediately threw her onto a glass coffee table, causing her to fall on it. Medical reports presented in court confirmed that Bongolan sustained injuries to her arm and ribs in this attack, suffering pain for days. Bongolan also stated in her testimony that Combs tried to kill her because he thought I was spreading gossip about Cassie. She said, "That night he was yelling at me, 'Did you badmouth my girl?' I didn't do anything. I was just sleeping there," expressing that she still couldn't believe the incident. The defense tried to shake Bongolan's account by focusing on the date of the incident. Lawyers claimed that on the night of the attack, which Bongolan referred to as 2016, Combs was actually on a concert tour abroad and presented flight records to the court to support this. Bongolan said she might have confused the dates due to trauma, but that the incident definitely happened. During this cross-examination,
emotional moments occurred. Bongolan defended herself through tears against the defense's attempt to catch contradictions. She sobbed, "They're trying to make me out to be a liar, but I'm not lying." The jury seemed to find Bongolan's general account credible, despite some date inconsistencies in her testimony. At the end of her testimony, Bongolan stated that she pursued a survival lawsuit because of Combs's attack on her, and that she gained courage when Cassie filed her lawsuit. Bongolan said, "For years, I kept silent because I thought no one would believe me. When Cassie spoke, I didn't want to be silent anymore," expressing that she expected justice from the court. The defense, however, pointed out that Bongolan was Cassie's close friend and insinuated they are planning and seeking revenge together. But this claim could not be substantiated with concrete evidence. Mia, victim 3, former employee, testimony. This woman, referred to by the pseudonym Mia, was a former employee of Combs and was listed in the indictment as the 4th person Combs forced into sexual intercourse. Mia stated that she worked for Combs for many years, initially seeing him as an older brother, but over time, she became a target of sexual harassment and assault. Testifying through sobs, Mia said that Combs sexually touched her several times without her consent. "What I experienced was the most traumatic, the worst things of my life," Mia said, stating that she was repeatedly harassed by her boss and was afraid to tell anyone. Mia testified that on one occasion, Combs cornered her in his office, kissed her, and sexually assaulted her, and when she objected, he asserted his power by saying, "Who would believe you? I'm Diddy." Another time, while she was part of the cleaning crew at Combs's home, Mia recounted that Combs suddenly called her to his bedroom and forcibly had intercourse with her, saying, "I froze. I couldn't say no." She stated that she did not complain after the incident out of fear of losing her job, but psychologically, she collapsed. Through Mia's testimony, the prosecution sought to show the jury that Combs abused not only his girlfriends, but also his vulnerable employees. During Mia's testimony, emotional moments occurred in the courtroom. Some jurors were also seen with tears in their eyes. As Mia concluded her testimony, she said, "I hated myself for keeping silent all these years, but now I am here." In cross-examination, the defense asked Mia why she didn't go to the police at the time, and whether her coming forward years later was for financial gain. Mia replied, "If I went to the police, who would protect me? He had people everywhere. Now, at least, we are all speaking together, we are strong," stating that being with other victims gave her courage. Jane, victim 4, former girlfriend from 2020-2024, testimony. At the end of the 4th week of the trial, early June, prosecutors called their final major witness, Combs's former girlfriend from 2020-2024, an unidentified woman referred to by the pseudonym Jane. Jane testified that she met Combs in 2020 and began a relationship, and while everything was great initially, the nightmare began within a few months. Jane stated in her testimony that the cycle of abuse and violence Combs subjected her to almost exactly mirrored what Cassie had described. "What he did to me was a copy of what happened to Cassie," Jane said, stating that Combs began acts such as drugging her, imposing his sexual desires, and forcing her to have sex with male escorts as soon as their relationship began. Jane also stated that Combs forced her to participate in freak-off parties, compelling her into non-stop 2-day sex orgies. She claimed that Combs recorded everything during these events or had it recorded, sometimes even placing hidden cameras in hotel rooms. Jane also stated that Combs isolated her from the outside world in demonic jealousy, tapped her phones, and essentially made her live a life of imprisonment. "He controlled me so much that I couldn't even see my family," Jane said, adding that Combs often yelled, "I am the demon, the devil, you cannot go against me." And on one occasion, he screamed these words at her face and slammed his gun on the table. This testimony created a chilling atmosphere in the courtroom. At the beginning of Jane's testimony, she avoided eye contact with Combs and spoke with a trembling voice. Just before Jane began to testify, an interesting tension arose in the courtroom.
Judge Arun Subramanian sharply warned the defendant Combs and his lawyers for attempting to communicate improperly with the jury. The judge noted that Combs had been observed shaking his head in a negative way towards the jury during Jane's testimony the previous day, and that this was strictly forbidden. "If you try to influence the jury's attention one more time, I will have you removed from the courtroom," the judge warned Combs clearly not to repeat this behavior. Defense attorneys then calmed Combs down and guaranteed that they would not do such a thing again. Meanwhile, as Combs's family members were also present in the courtroom, Combs looked them in the eye, bowed his head, and had a brief conversation with his lawyers. Another unusual incident in the courtroom occurred on June 3, 2025. A woman from among the spectators suddenly stood up and started shouting at Combs, "Diddy, they're making fun of you, they're messing with your legacy." The woman's identity could not be ascertained, as security guards immediately intervened and removed her from the courtroom. As the woman was escorted out, she continued to hurl incomprehensible obscenities like, "Pull your gun, pull it if you dare." The judge paused briefly due to this unexpected outburst, then asked the jury to disregard the incident. This spectator outburst remained a small anecdote illustrating how much public curiosity Combs's trial aroused and how it could even attract provocateurs. Jane's testimony continued after this incident. Jane disclosed that she ended her relationship with Combs in mid-2024, just before the police raids. Jane claimed that when Combs learned about the March 2024 home raids, he called her and said, "Don't speak against me, or it will be very bad." And she decided to go to prosecutors, fearing him even more after these words. Jane continued her testimony for 2 days. In cross-examination, defense attorneys suggested that the similarities in her testimony were inspired by Cassie's public allegations. Jane responded by saying, "When I read about Cassie's experiences in the newspaper in 2023, I was shocked because I had experienced something similar. If she hadn't been brave, maybe I wouldn't have spoken either." The defense also presented Jane's correspondence with Combs to the court, trying to show that Jane sent loving messages to Combs once or twice, even after they broke up. Jane said this was an attempt to stay on good terms with Combs because she feared him. Defense witnesses and strategy. After the prosecutors presented all their witnesses, Combs's defense team would have the right to call their own witnesses. The trial is expected to continue until mid-June. The defense's plan is reported to be to call some individuals who worked with Combs in the past to highlight his positive aspects and to undermine the credibility of the accusing witnesses. For instance, there were reports in the press that some of Combs's former bodyguards might testify, stating, "I never saw him lay a hand on any woman." The defense also continues to criticize the FBI's and prosecution's investigation methods, making moves to dismiss the case. Indeed, in the first week of June 2025, Combs's lawyers wrote a motion to the judge requesting that the case be entirely dismissed due to prosecutorial misconduct. In this motion, it was alleged that prosecutors focused on slandering Combs rather than presenting material evidence, influenced witness testimonies, and confused the jury. Specifically, it was stated that the prosecution prejudiced the jury by implying that Combs interfered with the police investigation regarding Kid Cudi's car being torched. Judge Subramanian, however, stated that he had given the necessary instructions to the jury to address these concerns, and that even if there was a misunderstanding, it did not warrant dismissing the case, thus rejecting the mistrial request. However, these attacks by the defense indicate how tough the case is, and that they are playing all their cards. Ongoing trial and public reactions, June 2025. As of mid-June, Sean Diddy Combs' trial was still ongoing. Although the case had not yet reached a verdict, the picture that had emerged so far painted a striking portrait of how a figure who had become an icon in the music world since the 1990s allegedly engaged in dark actions behind the scenes. Public reaction has also evolved since the beginning of the trial. Initially, some fans supported Combs on social media, but the emergence of Cassie's allegations, followed by countless others,
caused deep disappointment among many. This trial, dubbed the biggest #MeToo case in the music industry, sparked widespread debate across the United States. On one hand, anger grew over the seriousness of the charges against Combs and how artists could abuse their power and influence, while on the other, some circles continued to question why the allegations emerged years later. However, the concrete evidence presented in the case, videos, recordings, and the weight of the witness testimonies seem to have largely convinced the general public in favor of the victims. Brands that Combs owned or was a partner in, e.g. Ciara, CIROC Vodka, Sean John Clothing, etc., issued distanced statements after the lawsuit. Some business partners were awaiting the outcome of the trial to protect their image. In front of the courthouse, small groups of women's rights advocates and Combs supporters began to gather every trial day. One group, wearing Free Diddy t-shirts, claimed Combs was the victim of a conspiracy, while another group, carrying Justice for Cassie and Victims banners, demanded the harshest possible sentence for the defendant. These opposing demonstrations generally passed without incident, but the trial has created a socially divided discussion. Current status of the trial, June 2025. Prosecutors have presented all their witnesses, and the defense's witnesses are expected to be heard, followed by closing arguments. Whether Combs will take the witness stand remains a matter of speculation. He has a constitutional right not to testify, as it is being discussed that he might be in a difficult position during cross-examination. Legal experts believe the defense might decide not to risk Combs testifying. If the trial continues in this manner, jury deliberations are expected to begin in late June or early July 2025. If Combs is found guilty on all charges, he could face multiple life sentences. On the other hand, there is also the possibility of him being acquitted of one or several charges. The jury will decide separately for each charge. The course of the trial has already caused a major shakeup in the music and entertainment industry. Diddy, once synonymous with a bad boy image, has now acquired a notorious reputation associated with sexual abuse in the eyes of many. The sheer number of allegations that have emerged during this process has fueled discussions about whether other powerful figures in the industry might have engaged in similar behaviors. The public continues to closely follow the trial. Television channels, major newspapers, and online platforms broadcast each trial day with live blogs or special reports. According to a Washington Post report, some people even travel to the courthouse as if on a tourist trip to watch the trial, a phenomenon dubbed celebrity trial tourism. Conclusion and expectations. The case against Sean Combs has become one of the most sensational celebrity trials of the 2020s. Chronologically, the process, which began with Cassie's courageous revelation in 2023, moved to a new phase in 2024 with the involvement of federal authorities, an indictment, and an arrest, and in 2025, it transformed into a comprehensive trial before the American justice system. Throughout this process, very serious charges against Combs, such as racketeering, human trafficking, sexual assault, kidnapping, and arson, have been addressed one by one, and the names and testimonies of the victims have been entered into court records. The FBI raid details, official documents, and footage that have been disclosed during the trial have provided concrete data supporting the allegations. Public conscience has largely sided testifying women and other witnesses. Regardless of the jury's verdict, this trial is seen as a turning point against power dynamics and abuse allegations in the music industry. Every stage of the trial, as conveyed in this chronological report, has been meticulously documented by leading U.S. media outlets, CNN, CBS, NBC, New York Times, Washington Post, AP, Reuters, etc., and followed by the entire world. The trial is still ongoing, and when the verdict against Combs is announced, media and public reactions will once again peak. For now, everyone is focused on the jury's evaluation in the coming days, with the expectation that justice will prevail.